What's up, everybody? I want to start off my first video by kind of introducing what this channel is going to be about, a little bit about myself, and my thought process. So usually I'm a little hesitant to start anything, so I like to give myself a good reason to start something and convince myself to do it. So I'm going to use this video as like to record like my thought process through what I'm thinking for this channel. So I would say the focus for this channel would be storytelling overall. So either meta conversations, roleplay, readings, stuff like that. So let's get into the first slide. So I'm going to split these up into like chapters for the video and give you guys like sections to skip around. And these are basically the categories for each one. Non-traditional route, it's like more about myself, how I entered creative writing, and then get into like why I started like short stories and then moved on to like more ASMR roleplay scripts kind of thing. And then the actual like more detailed parts of the channel about what the channel is, introduce the world that I'm building. So let's get started with the first category. So a lot of these sections are mostly things that, writers typically do. They consume a lot of media, they blog, they do journaling, but traditionally I'm trained as a software engineer. So I try to integrate all this into how I write, and I try to make sure that everything I learn, I can integrate it within the skills I use them for. So as far as like media consumption goes, I consume a lot of media, so I have a grasp of what I enjoy, and I usually like dig into different patterns inside of like stories and stuff like that. So it's about like finding a niche that I enjoy, and then when I consume them, I recognize what they're trying to do while conveying the story, and what I've learned from like actually trying to build stories or write stories, it's harder to convey them. So I try to be like a heavy consumer of these things so I can see like what works, what doesn't work, and that kind of stuff. It's kind of like if you're playing a game and you're fighting a boss, the longer you fight that certain boss, you'll be able to recognize the patterns and then get the timing down, and then it's easier to actually defeat the boss afterwards. Those are some experiences that I use. So, and the next is blogging. So I run a blog that's usually for critique, and I usually don't talk about anime on a day-to-day basis. So it was like a outlet for me to be able to write about anime and be able to like express how I feel about certain anime that I've watched. And then I use using that blog, I was able to express like more persuasive arguments, be able to craft them easier as I practice. And then it's like the first time I experienced like actual creation of a product. So that practice allowed me to have like ways to build like more convincing. It's like a translation of like into stories by having like convincing worlds, characters, scenarios. And then through that blog, I ended up starting daily journaling. And this is like, it's almost like a ritual act of like writing every day, because the more you write, the easier it is to convey what you're thinking through paper or by typing and whatnot. A lot of it is about like analysis, like rethinking the way you solve a problem. And with daily journals, it's kind of like you do it every day, and then you were able to like condense it down into those like 28 to 31 days, summarize it into 1 month, and then with that 1 month entry you have 12 months you can summarize within a year, and then you'll have like this backlog of how your life has been. You can see like a big overview. It's like one big analysis of your life. It's an interesting process, and I just try to do it every day. And then the next one, EOS, of course, the software engineering. Usually when I do engineering, it's about like there's two things I try to integrate within my writing. It's the agile philosophy. Usually when you do agile, it's like about small incremental iterations. You learn throughout the process, and then with that learning experience, you can maneuver to deviate from each one. You try to improve every single iteration process. And then the second one is tooling. I like to create tools to help me in my process of programming, but also writing. I'll talk about that in a later chapter. But the two tools I have right now, it's about the three lenses of storytelling is what I call it. And then the second one is character personality framework. So as far as like text editors, I usually use Vim or NeoVim to write. So, and I translate that over to my writing as well. And then also the command line as well. So my first attempt at like actual agile development, it was short stories. So the initial idea was 3 characters, 3 stories, 1 world. And what I found out, I actually drafted out 1 story so far. Obviously, I want to get back to it. But one thing I learned about through the process is that I've become like too precious about my writing, end up like trying to fix it rather than write out whatever I wanted to say. And it makes it way too long for me to like, because I'm trying to perfect it. Also, I had the underlying thought of some people might not like the writing that I'm like writing. So I had to figure out a way to get feedback quicker without like getting in my head too much. So I created constraints for myself. So I switched gears and moved on to building scripts for ASMR roleplay. And then the constraint was 3 weeks, 3 scripts. With that constraint, I managed to actually complete it. And it was a great learning experience for me. I found out that based on feedback, it was mostly positive. People liked what I was writing. So that convinced me that it was something that I could actually pursue. Plus, I also I actually received some audio feels from some great ASMR artists. I think I'll create a playlist for all of them. I've like, there's like 8, I think. I'll have to look at my posts to see. But if anyone wants to check it out, I'll create a playlist for all of the fills that came about. But there was also like a feeling that I had while creating these scripts. It felt secondary. It was like I was building something for someone else. That's kind of how I felt when I was programming for other companies. Whenever I problem solved for something, it usually felt like this was someone else's problem, but I was solving it for them. I was creating content for another channel. That's the reason why I started making this channel, to 1, develop the world I was creating, and 2, integrate these skills, the script writing, the storytelling, all together into one place. So let's get to what this channel is actually about. So as I said before, it's mostly about storytelling. The storytelling I want to do is through news, and the world that I'm in is mostly cyberpunk. And through creating this overview video, I've kind of wanted to also have like meta conversations about storytelling and more about the tools that I build to create stories. With these 3 elements, it's kind of like I can build the world out and create excitement for the short stories that I'm building, that I'm writing as well. And it reinforces a theme throughout the world that I'm trying to convey. So let's talk about the world. The 2 themes that I have for the world are the power of information over like a populace, and then merging nature and technology. I mean, that's a lot of what cyberpunk is about. It's about rebelling against a system and having some semblance of power used by modifying your own body. And then with that, I created 2 sets of technology. I'm giving you sparse details because I want the world to be built through the lens of Cassidy Proudest, who I'm going to introduce as well. But the 2 technologies are bodily embedded device, or BED, and then the software that it runs on, which is the augmented reality operating system, or AROS. The company the only company that I'll introduce right now is Datum, which is a large conglomerate holdings group, and they're focused on data as a business. So they do data gathering, AI development, and building a news network. And that's where Casey comes into play. The way I develop them is they're an AI news reporter, and the way that it reinforces the theme is that the lens of Casey is through like a bias of whatever Datum's interest is. So it's like a filter of information that glosses over whatever Datum's doing, even if it's negative or positive. Casey would spin it in a way that would be more favorable to Datum. And it all started, as far as like the world starting, This is the initial like mappings. This is pulled from like one of my notebooks, and there's some spelling mistakes I just noticed, but it's fine. I use this to get like an idea of how people interact with data. And it's usually like there's 4 elements, you know, gathering the intel first, and then processing, and then securing that data, and then distributing it in some capacity. I built off of that. And this actually reminded me of something from Cyberpunk, obviously. Something that Alt AI said that I want to share with you in this clip right here.
Your death wasn't Johnny's fault.
How could you know?
Seeing you in his memories, it was an accident.
What you saw was his subjective view of what happened. A warped account of events he locked away in his subconscious and replayed time and again. It bears no resemblance to the truth.
Yeah, so the idea is like Johnny Silverhand being an unreliable narrator, and that theme of the one person you rely on being biased or viewing the information is interesting to me. And that little nugget, like that information, is seeded into something else when I watched the show The Discovery of Witches. And this is where I built the 3 lenses of storytelling. So broad overview, you have three lenses: the world, the society, the character. The world is the source of truth with no bias. Society is the long-living history that filters through the lens of culture. So their information is the most reliable, but they're still biased. And then, of course, the character, which is the most influential part of the story because you follow a character. The character tries to force their beliefs and transform the world in some capacity. But of course, they have to look at that information through the institutions and the grander society to like build out their information. They have their own internal bias and stuff like that. With that, you get reminded of how news and media gets disseminated. So of course, no matter what, everyone has a bias. Whether you're corporate, independent news, they all have it. So it's important to have like media literacy and developing that understanding. Every single media source has a bias, but you have to make sure that you know they're biased. And then through multiple sources, you'll be able to figure out like how this information relates to their bias, and you can navigate their bias and have like a better understanding of the grander scale of that information. The secondary tool that I built, it came from the mechanics of Burning Wheel. So their mechanics about like building an actual character, the character framework. The character mostly has like 3 things that are important: their beliefs, their instincts, and their traits. The belief is what you use to help the character enforce change over the world. It connects them to the world, and it also helps them want to do something within it. And my core philosophy for any story is about challenging the character's beliefs. So it's a character-based storytelling. As I mentioned before, near the beginning of the video, I mentioned the ASMR roleplay. You would think that would be my inspiration for role-playing, the reason why I want to roleplay, but the real reason is actual plays. Now, when people think actual plays, they usually are thinking, you know, the big ones, Critical Role, Dimension 20, but the first instance that I've watched these types of videos is through roleplay, specifically Dark Heresy. This is why I use that logo. The series itself is discontinued, but it was made by ItmeJP. It was the inspiration for playing TTRPGs and GMing a campaign. It's been a while since I've actually GM'd any TTRPG, so I'll be rusty. And clearly I'm not a voice actor or anything like that, but I'm using this as like the reason why I want to do these like videos. So the first video that has the actual like role playing of Casey Prodist is going to be, it's going to feel rough, but I'll get in the groove maybe like after a few videos. But I think that's about it. So I hope this video piqued your interest, and stick around for some new content. Like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the comment section below. Okay. See you later.